Before recording today's podcast, I spent some time revisiting Mississippi Circle, and I highly recommend that you do the same thing, whether it's on your streaming platform or, better yet, buy the album. It's the latest from Dylan Farrell, and he's agreed to be my guest today.
Reluctantly.
Today's show is brought to you by HaleyBenedictMusic.com. Hailed as the future star of country music by City TV, Haley Benedict introduces her new chapter with the single Things My Mama Says. It's her first release since signing with Big Loud Records and Local Hay.
Reluctantly.
Dylan Farrell, live and in person from Nashville, Tennessee.
That's right.
Are you called a Nashvillian now?
Well, I technically live in Mount Juliet, which is about 20 minutes outside of Nashville, just past the airport. So I'm so new to the area that I don't even know what a Mount Juliet person is called yet. So,
Well, you're obviously a Julian Fry.
there you go.
I've never thought of that. Is a Nashville person a Nashvillian? Or
I think they're
Nashvillian?
Nashvillian. I have a friend who lives down here, and he's from New Brunswick. He's French and still has a very thick French accent, and he just says he's Southern now. Mr. Mike Bork. I don't know if you know Mike or not, but
I probably, if I saw his face, I might go, "Oh yeah, that guy."
Yeah, he was big in the Canadian country scene for about 10 years, and then now he lives here and plays with all kinds of great artists and stuff like that.
New to Nashville, though. Has it been a year now officially?
It's officially been a year. Yeah, I've been here for a year now.
Pretty exciting stuff. We'll get into that a little bit more later. But first, living in Tennessee now, which for many people is a dream come true. I would imagine it similar for you.
Totally. This is something I've been after for years. Like, it's kind of crazy that I'm here, and I've been here for a year, and it's like the dream. And a lot of those dreams pass you by as you get older and stuff like that. And you're like, well, I wish I would have, but I'm actually living it. And that's, I couldn't ask for anything more. Like, it's pretty insane. So.
And you just celebrated your 34th?
Yeah, no, 33.
So 33 years of age, living in Nashville. Well, first, tell me about your day to day, as from when you got up until this point where we're chatting.
I mean, it's looked a little different in the last couple months, because up until November, my wife and kids have been in Alberta. So we've been a long distance family. So they're here now. So that changes things drastically. I used to wake up and play 3 gigs a day every day. But now it's now I wake up and I hang out with my kids for, the better part of the morning. My wife goes to the gym and I hang out and cook them breakfast. And really once I got them fed and stuff, I've been sitting at my laptop working for the last, several hours. And then my wife gets home from the gym and I came upstairs to do some work, do some video stuff, and, whatever is on the to-do list to try and move this train forward,
When you say you got onto the laptop to do some work, I'm assuming it's music work.
Yeah.
Is it all video producing, writing, editing, that sort of stuff? Are you working on?
Yeah, the marketing side of it. I'm really trying to, now that I've been here for a year, the first year was really about making a living, getting my family down here. That was the big thing. And now that we're here, I got to focus on the artist thing a lot more, because I didn't come here to play cover music. As much as I love what I do on a day to day, I'd definitely like to change things. So I'm in the career of my music and doing that. So yeah, it's like just thinking about all the different things that all of us artists need to do now, because it's drastically changed, as in the last, X amount of years. It's you have to be thinking about Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, all the things.
Yeah, it's a full-time job for anybody. There's usually no argument when somebody has 2 or 3 people hired to do that stuff for them if they have the means to do it.
That's the thing. Yeah, it's bootstrapping to get all this stuff done. It's overwhelming. It is a lot. And I think that's why a lot of artists stay stagnant, is that you just don't know where to start. You don't know what to focus on. You don't know what's going to move the needle, especially in your location. I think that's what I struggle with being in Canada in general, was like, well, I put this record out, but like, what do I need to, what's really going to move the needle here in Alberta? That was the hard thing for me, to be honest. Like, that's why I think I spun my wheels for so long, just because, and the Canadian music scene is incredible as far as the people go and everything. geographically, it's like, where can you really play if you want to tour and do that kind of thing? And that's the thing here that, as much as Nashville being a music city it's great to be here, but geographically, the dozens of markets you can hit within 3 hours of Nashville is astonishing compared to Canada,
And that's the thing. That's part of the reason why we're chatting today is because of the fact that you're a Canadian kid. You grew up in New Brunswick, made your way to Edmonton, and now in Nashville. And
Right.
for reasons that we'll dip into throughout the chat here today. First things first, tell me about being a kid in New Brunswick.
Yeah, so I grew up in a small little town called Minto, New Brunswick, which is just outside of Fredericton, about 40 minutes away. And it was a small little music town. There's lots of musicians that have come out of there. My dad was a musician that came out of there and had a pretty happening career in the early to mid 90s. Really, his entire life made a living playing music. Kind of floated between Alberta and New Brunswick like a lot of us Easterners tend to do. But yeah, growing up, I got really lucky that I had my dad to lean on and learn from. When my first job, I didn't have, my first job in high school was playing gigs with him. We played a place called Mexicali Roses in Uptown St. John. That was a 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. gig on a Monday night. And then I went to school the next day. So that alone is like more education than most of my peers get. A lot of people don't get to have that experience. And that was Monday, and then he would take me out on Fridays if the gig allowed, or Saturdays if the gig allowed. So yeah.
What was the bar scene? Was it at a bar? Were you talking about that you're playing? Okay, so you're 15 years old and you're playing at a bar. There's different provincial rules
Totally
from one to the next, which permits an underage player from going in and playing like a
That's
AAA
right.
Class A establishment bar that serves alcohol.
That's right.
So if you're doing that at 15 years of age, obviously New Brunswick, and I kind of knew that because of all of the process that we went through in Alberta in order to get underage musicians back into jam sessions and playing that kind of place too. Because here, correct me if I'm wrong, one set of music on a stage in a bar at the age of 15 is worth 3 months of music in your basement.
Totally. Absolutely. It was, I can't stress how great of an education that was. My dad, it wasn't like we built up to this thing of me going out and playing with him. It's not like he gave me a set list. There was a list, but I definitely didn't look at it. If there was, if I didn't do any homework, he just started taking me out. I don't even remember how it happened, but he just took me out. I remember my first one. He stood in a way that I couldn't even see his hands, so I had to start using these pretty quick. I'm talking about my ears, not my headphones. I learned how to use my ears pretty quick, and I couldn't have asked for anything more. I remember being nervous, and I messed up all the time. I can't believe he put up with me, to be honest, especially on those first few months were rough. But we were playing to, small little crowd in Uptown St. John, so we got away with it.
Was with your dad, with you starting to use your ears and listen and playing and learning by ear and that sort of thing, I've often heard with musicians that there are no wrong notes.
Well, I don't know about that one, and actually it's funny because I played drums for him too, and that was even rougher because that was my first instrument was drums, and he took me out. There was a Friday night gig we did at a place called the Outback in the east side of St. John, and I remember doing that gig, and man, I can't believe he let me do that with him because it was so I was bad. My timing was rough. I was probably playing too loud for that little tiny, and I just I didn't follow him as well as I should have. So there was definitely lots of the wrong notes, and there was a lot of
Side eye.
Oh yeah, lots of it, and I didn't grow up thinking my dad was a very patient man at all. But looking back, I'm like, man, he had some patience for that. I think that's a big reason why, I really like to gel with the drummer when I play now. And I kind of know how to coach them into getting to that, especially down here or, even doing blues gigs and stuff like that. It's a lot of heads up hockey, as I like to say. And it's getting a drummer to kind of sit in and gel with the groove is on a song they don't know or whatever the case may be, and just I definitely learned a lot of that from him. So
Does it get to the point where you like to write with a drummer as well, or are you doing?
yeah, big time. Yeah, I started doing that a couple years ago because I had to make a long story short. I knew I was going to make this move. That was the goal and the plan and the dream. So I actually started a band during COVID with a couple of friends from Edmonton in order to prep for the move. And I learned a bunch of country songs and stuff like that. But then that started to turn into something, and we started writing, and we would write together, and we would just write write grooves and stuff. And then I would take all that back, take that home and write lyrics to that, and then bring it to the band, maybe the next week or something like that. And we wrote songs that way. It was awesome. It was probably one of my favorite ways of writing, actually.
Was that the drum on your website? There's a video of you, a drummer, and a keyboard player at looks like at the bottom of Gallagher's Hill. Is that where it is?
That's at right at the Edmonton Ski Club.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's where the Folk Fest is.
That's right. Yeah.
The location for it. So are those the two you were talking about, the drummer and the keyboard player, the band that you were learning stuff before you went down to Nashville?
No, that was my blues band. That was like the Dylan Farrell band. Those guys went to Memphis with me, and they were on the Mississippi Circle. No, this other band was called the Drive Dogs, and it was my attempt of doing like a country southern rock thing, and getting away from the blues a little bit. So that was with Ben Oswell and Dennis Beauvert, and those guys, they've been at it for years. And I was in a band with them. I joined their band in January of 2020, the Cadillac Junkies, and that's with Shalissa Leach. And then when COVID hit, Shalissa left and went to BC, and the three of us were sitting there. I was like, well, let's do something. And that was kind of the start of this country thing that I got into. And it worked out well because I've been a blues singer my whole life. So singing some of this country, people, draw a lot of comparisons to some of the more soulful country singers out there, especially in the modern day of some of these guys that are making music now. So
the piano that you add, or at least you did with your blues band, the Dylan Farrell band.
Yeah.
You have piano aspect when you're doing country stuff as well?
I would like to, don't currently, but I love keys. I think that adds a whole other element. I like doing that thing. I got that idea from, there's a guitarist, he's from the UK, his name's Matt Schofield, and for the longest time, they did a trio with the organ, so like that whole time, Eric Doucette, he's playing the bass guitar stuff with his left hand.
That's exactly what I was going to bring up. Everything's with the left hand, and you can see the scale, or the...
Yeah.
Ding, 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 ding. Like you can see him doing that in the video.
Exactly. And that was probably one of our, I don't want to say one of our first attempts, but our bass player, he decided to kind of take a step back from music a little bit. He was getting into another career. Nigel Gale, who's definitely a prominent bass player in the Edmonton music scene. But instead of me trying to get another bass player, we did one gig like that, a couple years before that, and we're like, well, let's try this, and we did, and we really liked it, and we definitely with Eric is a very special musician, and we really felt nothing lacking. He's such a great musician that he killed it. So I kind of got that from Matt Schofield, but obviously there's some famous acts, The Doors being one of them, that they had, that kind of thing. And now there's a guy out of Wisconsin. His name's Greg Koch, and he's kind of one of the bigger guitar players in the guitar community. And he's kind of Danny Gatton-esque, and his group right now is that setup, except it's his son on drums. And then they travel with a B3, and it's an organ trio, and it's awesome. I saw them last year here, and it mind blowing. It was so good.
I've always said that the world needs more bass players, especially girls. So, anytime we have a chance to talk about it and somebody's talking about their kid getting into music, I always suggest bass. Because we need more bass players in the world.
We sure do. And it's a sure way to make a living in this industry.
Especially if you have a station wagon or a van, because you end up driving around with all of the gear.
There's that too. And if you can sing, that's like we have down here, we have these Facebook groups that we all kind of, it's our gig finders, what we call them. And it's, there's always people looking for singing bass players, singing lead guitar players. It's like a shortage, down here. And you can imagine how many musicians are here.
Yeah. And actually anybody who plays an instrument, if you can sing as well, that's just one more little feather in your cap for what's
totally.
So you're growing up. There's music in the home, obviously, with your dad being in a band. Was it primarily maritime music or stuff, or was it everything that he was doing?
Well, his thing in the '90s was it was a band called the Ridge Kickers, and they had eyes on them, and like I think it was like '93, '94. That was like a really great '90s country band, to the point that there's not many people that knew him. Like couldn't really drop his name so much in Alberta, but down here, there's actually people that knew who he was, which is just maritime musicians that live here now. And actually some of like one of the best connections I got as far as like finding a place to live and stuff was from a maritime guy that knew who my dad was and said to me, like the night I met him, he said he was my favorite singer of all time. So yeah, so he had like a cool, really great '90s country band and like amazing writing. And then once that kind of dissolved, he was writing a little bit more in the '90s, and he was a rocker really. Like his favorite bands were like Thin Lizzy and Grand Funk Railroad, and he was a huge Neil Young fan. So yeah, there was a lot of that aspect in it too. And then, really from, '96, '97 on, he was playing lounges and doing his solo act and playing with some bands here and there, but it was mostly kind of just him making a living in the Maritimes. Yeah.
You said in the Maritimes, Minto, small town where you grew up at Fredericton, and like the music scene was vibrant there.
It's funny. I haven't spent a lot of time in Fredericton because I never lived there. Like when I left, because my dad lived in St. John, so I kind of spent more time there, where a lot of my other friends, they all went and got a place in town and went to Fredericton. But I don't know a lot about that. I know a couple of musicians in town there, but St. John is really where I spent most of my time.
I suppose that the music scene is wherever you are making the music. And
yeah, like the Maritimes have always produced a lot of really, great acts, and it's that typical Canadian thing is that, it's these young kids that just don't have a lot of other things to do. It's cold in the winter. It's like, Joey Landra said that it's like it's -40, in Winnipeg for 4 months. It's like you learn how to play guitar or something like that. There's a lot of, especially, the East Coast, April Wine and Dutchy Mason and all that stuff. Like there's definitely a thing that is a Great Big Sea. There's definitely a thing, in that part of the country.
And earlier you just kind of mentioned it real quick there while you were talking about the story playing with your dad's band. You started on drums, but then ended up going with guitar. Is this your own little Eddie Van Halen story?
It's close, I guess, but I was a drummer, and the first gig that I did with him was a guitar gig, and then he started, because I was a drummer still, it's not like I totally gave that up. He started taking me out on drums, but I was hanging out with my stepmom when I think I might have been 13. Yeah, I think I just turned 13. It was Christmas break. She had a week off. I had a week off, and I went and stayed with my dad for a week, and we just hung out. We like played video games all week, and we went shopping and did that whole thing. And I was getting, not to throw any shade at any band, but I was just getting tired of the Nickelback CD we were listening to all week. And so she had a stack of CDs, and I went through the CDs, and I saw this thing with a beat up guitar on it. And it's I can't remember the exact title of it, but it was like the Stevie Ray Vaughan memorial show that they did at Austin City Limits, I think in like 93, maybe 92, but I'm pretty sure it was like 93. And I skipped through some songs, and I got to Bonnie Raitt playing in open A tuning, starting with Pride and Joy. And from that moment on, I'm a guitar player. I need a Stratocaster, and I'm going to play blues guitar. So yeah, that was really the turning point for me. And that's why I kind of stopped playing drums and went to guitar.
It's funny because my next question was going to be why the blues?
Right.
You're in your dad's band. He's playing primarily country, maybe sprinkling in some maritime music and that sort of thing. You grow up in Minto, close to St. John. You're in the Maritimes. You end up seeing that record when you're visiting your dad, and then all of a sudden, I gotta have that.
Yeah.
So you remember specifically and almost to the day where it was. That's your Beatles, that's your Rolling Stones, that's your Elvis Presley on the Ed Sullivan Show sort of thing, right?
100%. Yeah, it was definitely life changing. And then because my dad said, like, when I really got into it, I remember him saying, in the first few years, like, I never would have thought this is where you're gonna go. Like because I was singing a lot as a kid. Like he he noticed pretty quick that I had some vocal ability. I'm sure he was watching for it too. But I think out of all of my siblings, I think he saw that I had kind of a little bit of natural talent, and I was drawn to it. I used to sit and watch the credits of Space Jam because the music on Space Jam was amazing. Like it's I Believe I Can Fly, and I can't, I don't know if it was Jack Soul did that cool version of Fly Like an Eagle. And I remember it was like the first time I heard the sound of like a Fender Rhodes, and I was so drawn to that. So I was singing that stuff, and I would watch the credits so I could just sing that music when I was like, 3-4 years old. And then the blues thing, it just hit me. And it's funny because there's a lot of music that I think I skipped over on the guitar because when I was a drummer, that's when I was playing drums in bands. Like that's when I was playing, your typical AC/DC, Metallica, all that stuff. So I played that stuff on drums. I never really touched it on guitar like a lot of my friends, especially from town, the town I grew up in. They were all playing that stuff on guitar because I was playing drums. So
Reluctantly.
The podcast you are listening to is brought to you by The Terry Evans Show with Pete Potipko on Edmonton's Classic Rock, K97. You can listen to it from 5 a.m. to 9 a.m. Monday through Friday at 97.3 on your FM dial in Edmonton. If you are outside of the Edmonton market, you can listen online at k97.ca and click Listen Live anytime from 5 till 9 a.m. Mountain Time, Monday through Friday. The Terry Evans Show with Pete Potipko on Edmonton's Classic Rock, K97.
Reluctantly.
You credit Willie Nelson for having some influence on you. That was the other thing why I wanted to kind of ask why the blues, when there's obviously country roots, and then you credit Willie Nelson for some inspiration. Is it because of Willie's perseverance, his longevity, his writing, his singing, his personality? What is it about Willie Nelson that gets you?
Definitely his writing. And that was another, great thing that I got as a kid. A lot of my friends, their first concerts were, I even have a friend here in town who's an incredible singer, and we make the joke. My first concert was Willie Nelson. Hers was Britney Spears. So that was my first concert I got to attend. I think I was right around that age 13. It was 2006. So I would have been 14. That was and Nitty Gritty Dirt Band opened up. And I just remember saying to my dad after the show, I was like, I didn't know you were such a good guitar player. And and I think it really comes back to that, the soul music thing and the blues is like, he was country, but man, like he knew his stuff on the guitar and his writing showed for it. Like the man wrote Crazy by Patsy Cline, right? Like that's not a 1-4-5 song. And luckily I'll say I've played in the room that it was written in too, which is, another cool thing all in itself that's happened this year. I don't know. Willie just, one of the first songs I learned on guitar was Blue Eyes Crying in the Rain. And I remember listening, my dad would put in, I don't know if he was doing this intentionally or we were just listening to tunes, but I remember him showing me like, hey, listen to this. Oh, and I was playing a little bit of harmonica. He bought me a harmonica set. So Jack, I can't think of the guy's name. Mickey Raphael, who's been Willie's harp player since I think the 70s, now tours with Chris Stapleton, and I remember him showing me, you ain't got the money, or if you got the money, honey, I got the time.
You got
and
the
that
money,
harp,
I got the time.
And the harp line on that, and just hearing this guy play harmonica compared to Bob Dylan or Neil Young, because I didn't really get hit with the harmonica thing with blues yet. That didn't quite come at that point. So yeah, hearing that stuff and how complex the music was, but also how exciting and Whiskey River. Listening to like the live version of Whiskey River is incredible. Or another one that really hit me, and I still play this song to this day, Angel Flying Too Close to the Ground. And I always thought that was one of the best. I still think it's probably one of the best songs ever written. And then it's, that's kind of, in St. John, in Edmonton, there's a friend of mine got me hip to Lucas Nelson, Willie's son.
Isn't he terrific, Lucas Nelson, in the reel?
I can't believe that I didn't know who he was until a couple years ago, because it's like, he's such a great writer, and the whole band is a thing, and it's what a great band. The writing and the singing, it's like it's incredible, and I'm glad that he's working so hard. He's definitely pushing really hard to make a career of his own, and it's obviously people are going to look at him because he's Willie's son, but he's got something special too.
There's something that you brought up that you just kind of breezed over real quick, but I think it's really important. Everybody talks about the country superstar Willie Nelson, but the soul is really what Willie Nelson is all about. And
Yeah.
I noticed that with other artists like that, and Chris Stapleton is one of them. People pigeonhole him into the country genre, but he's more soul, in my personal opinion. And same with Justin Timberlake. When Justin Timberlake and Chris Stapleton sang Tennessee Whiskey on, I don't know if it was the American Music Awards.
Oh, wait. It was a country thing. Yeah, it might have been the ACMAs or the CMAs. I can't remember, but it was one of those. I'm pretty sure it was CMAs.
That stopped. The hair's standing up on my arms right now. And that's when I realized, Justin Timberlake, he's all about soul music. There is soul. You can find soul in country. You can find it in pop. You can find it in blues. You can find there's soul everywhere. So that really, really was something that was mind-blowing for me.
Totally. And I'm a huge Chris Stapleton fan. I try not to talk about it too much because there's always people that are, it's like, and 10 years ago, there was a bunch of, or 10 to 15 years ago, there's a bunch of people trying to, they're trying to be little John Mayer clones. And I was probably guilty of that myself. But I try not to lean into the Chris Stapleton thing, talk about it too much, because I am a huge fan. When I go play my downtown gigs here in Nashville, I can play 35 to 40 of his tunes. But they're such great songs, and I make the joke, everybody said, oh, he took that George Jones song, and I'm like, no. He took an Etta James song. He's a blues man in disguise. He's, he's in the country world, but like, if you look at all of his tunes, like 40% of them could be blues standards, especially the minor blues stuff. There's so many of those tunes that are just like, those are just cool minor blues tunes that, he's putting some other country elements in, or the way he sings, his southern accent, or whatever you want to say. There's so much soul in what he does, and I'm a huge fan. Yeah.
Do you ever delve into that? Do you ever explore the Etta James, the Sister Rosetta Tharpe, or stuff like that? Go back before the so-called big influences like the Beatles and Elvis and stuff?
Yeah, there was. I'm a huge Etta James fan. Actually, just a couple weeks ago, I was driving. I was listening to that 7-Year Itch record, which is such a killer record with so many great tunes on it. But eventually, funny to say, I love biopics, and I remember when I was a kid, I think I rented it when I was probably 17 or something. I remember going and renting the DVD for the movie Cadillac Records, which is all about chess records, and that has Etta James and Muddy Waters and Howlin' Wolf, and I can't think of the harp player's name.
Sonny Boy Williamson?
No, not Sonny Boy. The guy that did My Babe.
Drawing a blank.
I am too. That's ridiculous. I'm sorry. That definitely opened up a thing, and I was a huge bbking fan already. BB, that was as early as I found Stevie, I found BB as well. So, but that Chicago blues thing, and hearing Etta James sing and seeing like that was a blues label, so the stuff that they were putting out, like My Babe and Hoochie Coochie Man and Smokestack Lightning, it eventually evolved into Etta James singing At Last, and when Chuck Berry is quite predominant in the movie as well. That helped with bringing me into that world quite a bit, because the production was so good, the singing was so good, and you kind of, it's a really good way to get introduced to that stuff. I know people, Etta James herself, when Beyonce sang at, I think, Obama's inauguration, she had a fit, but that's just, somebody like Beyonce is just going to bring young people to that music. That's like as simple as it gets. And I think that, music fans get a little too up in arms over that stuff. It's kind of well, this isn't blues, or this isn't bluegrass, or this isn't country, or this isn't rock. I had a conversation with a friend about Billy Strings. Billy Strings last spring, I think he sold out 2 dates at Bridgestone, and he's playing bluegrass guitar. Look what he's doing for the genre, and he's moving it forward. But he's, without somebody like Billy Strings, there's no young kid going down the rabbit hole, or there's a lot less young kids going down the rabbit hole of finding out who came before, who were the bluegrass guys in the 50s and 60s and 70s and so on and so forth. And that's the same with blues. It's like somebody like Jack White or Joe Bonamassa, or John Mayer. Like John Mayer is huge. The amount of people that found Stevie Ray Vaughan because of John Mayer, and the amount of people that found Albert King because of Stevie Ray Vaughan or John Mayer, it's like we have to stop getting so mad at these people. It's like, yeah, they're not playing typical 12-bar blues nonstop, or playing really traditional blues, but like it doesn't mean that we can't call it blues.
Did you know what something you said, you mentioned the biopic movie you were talking about, and it just popped into my head because we were talking about Willie Nelson. Have you read Willie Nelson's biography?
I have not. No.
Oh my God. It is
I'll
such
have to
a
write
good
that
book.
down.
Willie Nelson is my father-in-law's favorite artist.
Nice.
So I'm the same way you are about biopics. I'm about
Yeah.
biographies. I've got John Lennon, I've got Neil Peart, I got Mick Jagger, Keith Richards, I got Nancy Jones, who was George Jones' wife. I got all of these books are right on my shelf right there. But the Willie Nelson one was terrific, and Willie is such a different guy. I like his quote: "Replace negative thoughts with positive thoughts, and all of your thoughts will be positive." That's just the way he lives his life.
Yeah.
If anybody can take one day of Willie Nelson and incorporate it into theirs, then
Totally.
that's a win. The other thing, too, is you were bringing up B.B. King. Did you ever get a chance to meet B.B. King, go and see him, and then meet him after his show?
No, I never did. And probably one of my biggest regrets in life was he was playing in St. John mid-2000s, and I ended up going, I was really into paintball as a kid, and I went paintballing instead of seeing B.B. King, and I'll never... And, I was really, it was a tournament. It wasn't like just hey, we're going to go, it was like a competitive thing, and it was a big event that we were leading up to and waiting for all winter for this big thing. So we ended up, I didn't get to see B.B. King, and I regret that. I've got to play at his club, a couple times. That was cool. And actually, I played at his club, and then that was a couple months before he passed away, and they had the hearse parked right out in front of his club. And I remember huddling up with my buddies before we went on stage, right where that, in this picture I saw right where the hearse was. So yeah, I really regret not seeing B.B. King, and that's how it is though. Sometimes it doesn't always work out,
That's another biography that would be a good read for you.
Yeah.
Right?
Have you read Jimi Hendrix's Room Full of Mirrors?
A Room Full of Mirrors. I have it right there, but I have not read it. I have not gone on vacation for that long.
You should that one's a special one. And I think if anybody reads a biography, that the guy that wrote it spent he dedicated well over a decade of his life and to interviewing people and talking to somebody that sat next to Jimmy when he was in grade 2. He really, really committed to it. And it's a great read.
I named my son after B.B. King.
I didn't know that was his namesake. Oh,
yeah.
Cool.
But you've met Riley.
I've hired Riley before.
That's right.
Yeah. We did a week at Blues on White together and did some other stuff in that summer. Actually, we did a blue. I think no, I don't know if we did an organ trio gig with him or not, but we might have. Anyways, yeah, no, Riley's he's killer drummer. Is he? What is he up to now? Is he still working with that artist that?
He did the month in India and in the country of Oman there in December.
Nice.
And at the end of February, they're doing shows in Australia with A.P. Dillon.
Amazing.
But yeah, he's been all over. He's Dubai, India,
man,
all over the U.S. and Canada and stuff. So it's been super cool.
Well deserved.
Yeah. Well, thank you. With you growing up in New Brunswick, and then in 2012, you made the big step. Was it tough to leave New Brunswick and go to Edmonton?
Yeah, I went out for the 1-year plan, like every other Easterner, and stayed for 10 years. It was hard. I was moving in a situation that my sister and my brother-in-law were already out in Alberta with their 1-year-old son. So I lived with them for a couple of years, and that was way up in Grande Cache, Alberta. I was an underground coal miner for a couple of years. It was shift work, so I had, several days off at a time, and I would go to Edmonton, and that's where I started to meet people, and it just... kind of the natural evolution of it was to be like, well, I got to move to Edmonton and quit this coal mining thing, which is weird because that was probably one of the only jobs I had where I wasn't, every job I ever had, it was always a means to an end, just to well, if I do this for a while, I could, maybe get some gear or set myself up to record or whatever the case may be. But that's what got me out to Alberta, which was, obviously necessary. It was hard to leave, but at the same time, it's all part of the plan. And I'm your typical rambling musician. I can't stay in one place too long.
Well, I suppose you can take the boy out of New Brunswick, but you can't take New Brunswick out of the boy. Do you find yourself wanting to go back, or I know you were back just before Christmas, weren't you?
And I was there at Christmas, and I was there in August. It was my first time home for Christmas in, I think, 11 years. And honestly, it's with, what Canadian air travel is like, it's easier for me to get home being in Nashville than it was for me to be in Edmonton. We flew to Boston, all four of us, my wife and two kids, and drove 6 hours onto my mom's house. And it's just way easier for me to get home now. And I'm at a point where I want to get home a couple times a year. And, my wife is from Edmonton, so we'll still be making trips to Edmonton, but I would love to get home 2-3 times a year.
So you come to Edmonton from New Brunswick eventually by way of Grande Cache and the coal mine, and you start playing the bars and gigs and settling up with some people. Did you primarily go as a sideman, as somebody's guitarist for the first little while?
Yeah, I did a little bit of that. I've always been, because of that, what my dad did, I always sang and played guitar and was capable of doing solo acoustic gigs. So I always did a little bit of that. I would play guitar for other people, and it's always been a big mix, which has been a godsend for, as far as me being here, because I can do so many different things that I got pretty busy pretty quick here. But yeah, I played guitar for lots of different people in Edmonton. And did lots of sideman work kind of all over the spectrum, did lots of, played for my folky friends. And eventually, in the last few years leading up to my move down here, I was playing for some country acts every now and then, not a lot, but enough to kind of, people were calling me, which is cool. But then I would also go do so many of my own, solo acoustic gigs, or I was playing with the Drive Dogs a lot, which was awesome. I love those guys. And we had a blast. Like, it was cool because we just like hopped in I got a RAV4, and we had a U-Haul trailer, and we were traveling all over, especially like the northern part of the province. We were playing all the time, like up in casinos and, north of Edmonton, and doing weddings. And it was almost a little unbelievable, because I've been playing blues so long that as soon as I started playing, maybe a little bit more of a popular genre, I started getting a lot more calls. It turned into something really quick, and I was surprised by it.
Being in the band, somebody's guitarist, and then being in the band, and then all of a sudden the Dylan Farrell band. How much of a difference is it really from you going to being in the band with the guys as the band to it being the Dylan Farrell band?
Yeah.
There's a name of a band, and then there's your name on a band, right?
Right, yeah. Well, that's what I did more of, was, the Dylan Farrell band thing. The Drive Dogs was really the first band I was in where we were all in. I was, did lots of sideman work, but, outside of that, like the only other band I was in was when I was like 17 years old. So when it's the Dylan Farrell band, it's obviously a lot more stressful. You're hiring people, and you got to pay them, and which means you got to get people out to shows. And I didn't do a lot of that, because it was a pretty big hill to climb to try and get people to come out to shows when you're trying to tour. And the musicians deserve to be paid. And, when you do a ticketed event in another city, and, you have to try and find the right deal to make it that you can pay everyone. And that's what I did for this release of Mississippi Circle, was like, we went on a small little run of shows. We did like a weekend in Edmonton. We did a show in Calgary. We did a show in Red Deer. And I wanted to bring a 5-piece band, because I never get to play with another guitar player. So, if I was lucky, I got to do 4-piece, but I did for this one. There's all these songs I've always wanted to play that I've just never really got to, play in a professional setting. So yeah, it's always a stressful thing, but it's also extremely rewarding when you're, get to play your music, and you get a reaction out of a song that you wrote that maybe you didn't really, sometimes you almost get lost in the song, and you're like, well, I'm just going to do this for me, because I don't feel like anyone's listening right now. And then you finish the song, and, there's thunderous applause afterwards. Like, there's not a better feeling than that. And that happens a lot when you feel like you're just alone in a room, and then you get a bit of a reaction afterwards. So it is a very, very different thing, just because you want you want to make sure everyone's compensated, and it's there's just so many elements of it to try and make it work.
It's hard to find bandmates or
Yeah.
support band that have the same passion, drive, and want
Yeah.
that you do. You know,
Yeah.
run into a million guitar players, or bass players, or drummers, and they're all in until Monday morning when they have to go to work.
That's the big thing. Yeah. And people, it's almost like when I first got the question, I was so surprised by it. I'm like, well, obviously not. But people would ask me all the time, it's like, so your band's going with you, right? And I'm like, no, those guys all have jobs. You know? That's exactly it. Everyone's all in. And that was the big thing with me making this decision is, like I said, we had this cool thing happening with the Drive Dogs, and we were kind of getting to the point where we were all in. We were buying gear together. We bought all these cameras together. We were putting together this project. Then I had to make my wife basically came home one day and says, okay, we should move to Nashville. And I'm like, okay, let's do it. But then I had to think really hard about this band that I had. But, one guy was becoming an accountant. He was just finishing school. So he wasn't all in like I was. He's been doing the music thing for a decade plus. And the drummer, he was a musician for probably 3 decades. And, he was at a point in his life that he got a job during COVID. And he's like, oh, this is kind of nice to have money in my bank account and stuff like that. So, it really came down to like, I can't, I have to, this is something I have to do is play music. I can't do anything else. I've tried. There are really no other options for me. So I had to make the decision for myself to do this.
I know a guy who is in the exact same boat as you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Know him real well.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing. And I've had some moments when I did have a job or something like that. And I remember watching, there's that really great Tom Petty documentary, the Heartbreaker documentary that I think it's like 4 hours long.
Yeah.
But there's a point where like Tom is being interviewed and he's like, somebody asked him, he's like, like, I really like this music thing, but I also could be a lawyer or a doctor or something like that. And Tom said to the guy, he's like, well, if, that's an option, you should probably go do this. Cause like this music thing is not really like, it's gotta be something you have to do. And that's exactly how I feel. Like, during COVID, I had a 40-hour week job. Thank God. I remember that first summer that things opened up, I was a new dad. I had a 10-month-old daughter. And in July and August, I did like 27 gigs one month and 26 the other month. And I was working a full-time job and I was a new dad. So it was like, I saw these 3 things and I'm like, well, one of these 3 things can't work, can't happen. And it's not going to be me being a dad and it's not going to be music. So like I have to, and everything was so volatile at the time that it was, I had to find a way to make it work. So I, started teaching again, but, yeah, it's something that there's people like us that just, they have to do it. There's no other option. So me being in Nashville, it's like, this is where I need to be because this is the best chance for me to, get to do this until I'm, into my 70s kind of thing.
The other thing too, being down in Nashville, a lot of being in the music industry is the socializing musically, and it's networking, it's going out and meeting people. That's one of the reasons why I asked you right off the hop what your morning was like, because I know your morning is different in Nashville than it is anywhere else because of the opportunity. Is that fair to say?
Totally, yeah. Yeah. And, my first month here, lots of cool things happened, but I went to, one of the things that happened was, I went to a little Mexican restaurant in Madison, which is just kind of an extension off of East Nashville. And I was sitting there and there was a bunch of dudes in their 70s and they were doing their weekly lunch that they, or whatever. And, when you're in a small town in Alberta or in Grande Cache, Alberta, there's guys that we would say, oh yeah, they're sitting up drinking coffee at A&W coal mining at A&W, and they're just talking about coal mining. Well, or in, maybe a farming community, they're talking about farming, and that's the thing. Well, I was sitting in this little Mexican restaurant and they're talking about recordings. Oh, that's just the best version of this song. And they're like well into their 70s. Like one dude's in a wheelchair, one guy's got a walker. Like they're probably pushing 80. And that 60 years ago, those guys were they were the guys. You could just kind of tell. And I'm like, yeah, this is so cool. This is where I need to be, because I want to be them when I'm 70, and having these conversations about, oh yeah, what was that tune you played on with so and so? Like that's what's so cool about this town. There's 50,000 working musicians in one city.
And it's big risk, big reward too, because
Yeah.
I mean, you took a big risk. You went down in early 2024. You went down without your wife Nicole, without your two daughters. They stayed behind in Edmonton.
Yeah.
And you went to Nashville, got established, and got to the point where now they're with you, which I think is remarkable. So good for you.
Yeah, it's nice to wake up with them every day now. It was definitely some lonely moments, and there's some songs coming out soon about all that stuff.
I was actually going to ask you, when did you write Without You, and was it about?
No, that's an old song. Well, not an old song. I wrote that in 2017. I wrote that with a guy named Ian Moore. Do you know who Ian Moore is?
He's another one of those guys. If I saw a picture of him, I might know him.
Yeah, he's an Austin, Texas guy. He was part of the Stevie Disciple movement that happened in the 90s, all these young guys playing strats, but he didn't really want to be looked as that. He really hated that he was part of that. So he ended up, he quit playing electric guitar and became just like an acoustic songwriter guy. But he's definitely got back more into playing electric guitar in the last decade or so. But the producer I worked with on Mississippi Circle, Brian Moncars, he put together that right, and we wrote Without You, and we wrote Last Time. Those are the two tunes that we wrote from that little writing session.
Great. I just listened to it and I thought, this sounds like a song that may have been written by a guy who just moved to Nashville and was trying to make things happen. And then 11 months later, he sent for his wife and kids. So
yeah, it definitely could be. It definitely could be. Yeah, but no, there's a cool song that I wrote with my friend Jessica Terrell here a few months ago called "Letter to Vi," and my youngest daughter, her name is Violet. I would, do these trips back to Edmonton and, get to hang out with them for a week. And I would always tell them, my kids are 2 and 4, and I would always tell them, like, the day before I leave, I'm like, okay, I'm not going to be here tomorrow. So when you wake up or when you get home from daycare, I won't be here. And my oldest kind of understood it, but my youngest, she got home from daycare and she went looking for me, went, Daddy, where are you, kind of thing. And then that turned into her crying, and because she couldn't find me. And that just broke me into 1,000 pieces. And so anyways, that's what this tune is about. So we'll hear that, I think, in the next few months.
Reluctantly.
The Edmonton Oilers Community Foundation is a proud supporter of oil country and has been contributing to our community's success since 2001, with a focus on programs aimed at those most vulnerable in our community and youth hockey programming as well. You can find out more about the Edmonton Oilers Community Foundation by going to nhl.com/Oilers/EOCF.
Reluctantly.
The move to Nashville, how many hoops and barrels did you have to jump through, and how on fire were they when you had to do it?
The first one wasn't terrible. I learned a lot about the whole P2 work visa thing from my friend John Hewitt, who is a fantastic artist from Edmonton, or he's from Ontario, but he's been in Edmonton for quite a while now. I learned a lot about the P2 work visa through him, and the first one wasn't too bad. You got to spend some money and apply for the work visa, and you have to book gigs for the entire year to get your whole year worth of P2. But the second year was more, the hoops were on fire this year because the processing centers were substantially backed up. So I got my first one. They say give it 3 months, give it like 90 days, maybe 120 days. The first one I got in less than 30 days, and all my friends were getting them in that amount of time, and we didn't think of anything of it. So my second one I put in with 90 days notice, but they were backed up in a 6.5 month wait. And then that eventually turned into a 7.5 month wait. So I had to pay the premium processing fee of $2,800 USD in order to get my work visa in time for me to come back down, or else I would have had to just basically go home and start over. So I just had to bite the bullet and pay it. So yeah, the hoops were on fire this year. So I've learned my lesson. I'll have to apply for my next work visa. Like I just got it. Well, when they came down in November, That was the start of my new work visa. Like, I'm going to probably have to apply for it just to be safe, probably in March.
Do you have a gig later today?
I do. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I got one. I pretty much, especially in the summertime, it's like it can be 2 to 3 a day. One gig days are rest days for me. I've got to that point, especially my voice. The 3 gig days are a lot on me, but there's days where if I go do a little 3-hour gig and that's 3 hours of singing, like an acoustic 3-hour gig, like my voice actually repairs. It's like my voice is at a point. It's like I compare it to a runner that, when they're training for a marathon and their rest days, they still go run a 5K. It's kind of like that at this point. So it's a lot of singing, but it's good.
Everybody talks about a living wage for musicians. And, when I first came to Edmonton in 1986 and started hanging around with musicians and becoming a part of the music scene, I know that people were, making $100 or $150 for a gig if they were well paid. The thing was, you could do a 6-night, 6 nights per week at one bar where there was the CI South or the Sidetrack or where, well, maybe not the Sidetrack, but other places. But even to this day in Edmonton, if a musician gets $100 for a night of work or $150 for a night of work, that's just it's criminal how it hasn't changed for musicians. Is it more significant in Tennessee, or is it the same sort of thing?
It's a different thing here. You really do work for tips here. The Edmonton thing is definitely interesting. There's still lots of $100 gigs. I was lucky I got to a point where I still did that stuff, but me being able to do so many solo acoustic gigs, it was like my bar was set a little bit higher. The Tennessee thing is a little interesting because it is very much tip-based. And because it's tip-based, it is all about how good you are and what circuit you're in. There was a gig I did in the spring. There was a front guy, and it was his last gig. He was like, I'm going back to Nebraska. I'm done. I'm over this. I got nothing in my name. And at that point, I was doing okay. I was like playing a good amount, and I saw what circuit he was in, and he was making like this, I won't say too much, but this particular circuit pays nothing. Like I'll go do a Monday morning gig for them, like a 9:30 gig, and it's $40 base pay for a 4.5-hour gig. But it's really, the tip thing is really where it's at. So I played a 4-hour gig where the pay is $100, but I'm walking away with $400 or $500. That's really how the Nashville thing works. There's so many musicians here, and the whole point of the downtown thing was really to supplement, going on the road and all that stuff, which is what it's going to be for me, moving forward at some point. So it is kind of all over the place. There's definitely terrible gigs like every other spot, every other city. There's entry-level gigs. There's better gigs to get. There's some that are great that are like, well, this is definitely worth my time, I can wake up on a Monday morning and go to work and be back for dinner time and do 2 gigs, and, you can do a 10 to 2 and a 2 to 6 and be back by 6:30 and having dinner with your family.
You mentioned about your Canadian friends or friends of yours from Edmonton who are down there, and I don't know if we've got the same circle of musician friends. Yours is probably much wider than mine, but I just know there's Drew Shelka from FKB is down there.
I did not know that I knew that they were doing some stuff down here. I didn't know that he was...
Well, he's a guy actually I've been talking back and forth with about the whole work visa and everything down there. Haley Benedict has got an apartment down there now that she's signed with.
Yeah, she's killing it right now.
Yeah. Clin Blue is doing some stuff. Are you familiar with her? She sings at Tootsie's.
Yeah, she's in that circuit. I ran into her, and we never met in Edmonton, but I was on the elevator. I'm like, you look familiar. Where are you from? And she said, I'm from Edmonton. It's like, oh yeah, me too. And then she asked like how I, knew her or whatever. And I was like, I think I just have you on socials or something like that. But yeah, I ran into her in the garage, in the parking garage one day. But yeah, she's doing some stuff with the Tootsie circuit.
Well, and Riley drummed for her a bunch of times
really?
Up here as well.
I did not know that.
Yeah, and talking with Drew, and I don't know if it's the same for you. Is it true that they're looking for drummers? They're looking for decent drummers all the time in Nashville?
Yeah, there's just opportunity all the time. Like that's the thing. And there will be people here that say there's too many drummers, but then there's also a need for drummers. And it comes down to like, there's so many aspects of what makes you hireable, as I'm sure you know, and as Riley knows, it's like, Riley's a great hang, you know, he's a cool guy to be around. That is half the battle. And, you know, being competent and on, you know, I've played with some of the, you know, in Edmonton, there was some of the best players I could have ever imagined to play with that, you know, we didn't make a great band because personalities or whatever the case may be. It's like, you hear so many classic stories of that stuff, like, oh, this person was pretty rough on the road. So it's especially in this town, because, you know, in Edmonton, you just got to show up and play the gig. But, you know, when you're hiring somebody, especially, you know, the next step above me where I'm at, it's like, can this guy be cool and clean on a bus for 2 weeks? Or this girl be cool and clean on a bus for 2 weeks? You know, are they going to believe in their stuff everywhere? Like, you have to be able to do all that stuff. And, you know, yeah, there's all kinds of, like, Riley would kill it down here. He would be great, you know, and he would get hired so fast. Yeah, it's that's the thing. It's like, you know, when I got to Canada, they're like, oh, another guitar player. But like, I played 369 gigs last year, you know.
I saw that. I thought maybe it was a typo. I thought, are you kidding me?
No, and I'm on the, well, I don't want to say I'm on the low end, because I'm not, but that was with me, you know, going to New Brunswick for 3 weeks, going to New Brunswick for 10 days, going to Edmonton. I think I made 5 trips back to Edmonton for a week at a time. I have friends that were well into the 500s.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's something else.
It's something else. Because you finish a gig and it's a schedule, right? It's like there's a 10 to 2, 2 to 6, 6 to 10, 10 to close. So you'll do one gig and then you'll go across the street to the next one. There's 60 venues. There's like there's just a lot going on down here. And it's not all great, but, you know, it all averages out, and you look at what you made, and everyone in town's saying the money's gone down in the last, you know, this year and the year before, but I'm not here to do that. Like, it's supplementing my income, and it's making it so I can, you know, have my family here in a house and all that stuff. But it's,
no,
you
that's
know,
great. I'm so happy for you that,
thank you.
Yeah, the thing that you're talking about with being, you know, it comes back to that social aspect of music. You can be the best drummer, or you can be the worst drummer. If you're the worst drummer with a terrible personality, you'll never get hired anywhere. If you're the best drummer, but you've got a terrible personality, it certainly limits your stuff. But even if you're a decent drummer, but you're great to hang out with, you're a fun person to be around, then that lends itself more. And then, of course, being able to sing, that also helps too.
That helps too, yeah.
I mean, yeah, we're talking about the experience as well. You know, I was talking about my son. He's got Coachella and Lollapalooza experience. He's got stadium. He's got arena experience. So,
yeah, and that's the thing is getting that stuff under your belt, especially being an Edmonton musician. Not saying that stuff is out of reach, but it's a lot, you know, further between. And like down here, it's like band I'm playing with tonight. It's like drummers play with Martina McBride, Aaron Tippin, so on and so forth. Bass player was Aaron Tippin's band leader for 17 years. Fiddle player plays with Terry Clark. And then the guitarist and steel player, he plays Merle Haggard's son, Sammy Kershaw, Gene Watson. Like, and we're just playing a gig downtown together. So that's what's so cool about it, is that you get to be in that circle, and then all of a sudden, like, hey, we need a guitar player. Dylan would be fine with that, or Riley would be good with that. Like, that's what's kind of neat about it, is that it's the exact same. As far as your musicianship goes, there are terrible musicians. There are incredible musicians, exactly the same as Edmonton. But the ceiling there's just no ceiling, you know. And that's what I love about it here.
All those musicians that you just rattled off, I'm sure if they keep practicing, they're going to be pretty good one day.
I bet so. Yeah. I bet they will.
And do you ever go in? Do you ever pop into the jams? I've been down Broadway walking back and forth. I went down there to visit Mike Plume when he was living there.
Yeah.
And going into Martin's Barbecue and then in and out of the bars during the jams and stuff. As soon as you walk in, all of a sudden to your left, there's a stage with 7 guys in there. Do you ever go in and do some of the jams and throw your name on a list?
A little bit. I did when I first moved to town. There was one that I did like years ago. A friend of mine from New Brunswick was moving down here, and I drove her down, and that was at a place in Printer's Alley. So I went to that jam like years ago, and then when I got back, I wanted to check that out. And I go every once in a while, but it's kind of a different thing here, because when you're playing 10, 11 times a week, it's a little less likely you'll go do those things. I probably should do that stuff a little bit more, but it's harder to get out. It's hard, you really got to think about, especially a singer, you got to think about, making sure your voice is strong, and you got to have that downtime and rest time and all that stuff. So I don't go as much as I probably should. But that's the other neat thing about the Broadway thing, is that we all kind of know each other in a way. And when you're just hanging out downtown on Broadway, it's nothing to be like, because I don't know if you know this, I'm sure you do, but like the Broadway thing is 4-hour gigs with no breaks. So, my buddy Aaron Curry from New Brunswick, he lives down here, and, it's nothing for him to be like, hey man, I got to pee, play a song on guitar for me so I could go to the bathroom, like that's kind of, and everybody gets to have a break, and you get to make it, but it's not like the traditional 4-hour gig, 1-hour set, half-hour breaks. That's not a thing here. It's really like you kind of play 4 hours straight.
What about session stuff? Do you ever make it to any session stuff, playing for other things, or going in, doing some writing and playing for people who are recording?
Yeah, I don't do a lot of session work. I would love to, but it's one of the things that I kind of learned in the last few years is I really need to be focused on what I want to be doing. I love being in a studio. It is my favorite thing in the world. I do have a little bit of session work coming up potentially, but it is in Nashville, as far as being one of the guys, like one of the session players that gets called. That's a pretty tough nut to crack. Not saying you can't do it. There's plenty of guys that do it. I'm here to be me and do my thing. That's going to be my focus. So if that weren't the case and I wanted to be a session guy, then I would be doing all the necessary things, to make that happen. And, if somebody calls me to do session work, I'll gladly do it. But it's just, there's so, like, especially like the really good session work, your Tom Bukovacs and Brent Masons and Kenny Aronoffs and, those guys, like
You're talking Hall of Fame now. Yeah. Some of the things that just popped into my head was Leland Sklar and Waddy Wachtel from Immediate Family. And, if you want to go back further, Muscle Shoals guys and all that.
And that's the thing is like, there's the people that play on the records, like on the big records, that's a pretty small group of people. Like it's not like there's 100 drummers getting all those different records. There's like 10 from what I understand. I mentioned Aaron Curry earlier. Like I knew him from when we were like in our early 20s, late teens. And I saw Aaron. I was like, I remember seeing him play guitar. I was like, I'm not going to be able to do this for a living. Look at this guy. He's not doing it for a living and he's incredible. Well, when I got here, I would like tell people I know him and that I knew him back, 15 years ago. And they're like, you knew Aaron back? Like Aaron's the best player in town, but he's like not doing those. He's trying to, and he's working on that. And he's getting some cool work, but he does a lot of demo sessions and that kind of thing. So it's a tough nut to crack. And yeah, so that's just not something that I would love to, but I have to be focused because I'm notorious for being like, well, I want to do this and this and this and this. So I'm really just trying to focus in and focus on the artist thing, because I think that's going to be the thing that's going to work for me, is being me. And I want to tour. I want to do my thing under my own name. I want to bus. I know it's such a like cliche thing, but I would love to do, 150 dates a year and have a tour bus. That would be incredible.
With a stinky keyboard player.
Yeah. Well, hopefully he's not stinky, but it happens. But yeah. And, I heard Derek Truck say that, not to, over talk or anything like that, but like I heard Derek Truck say that it's like as a band, you kind of need to do 150 shows a year to get good as a band, and that's the big goal for me. It's like I want to have a band where I get to do my thing for 150 shows a year, and I've got to taste. I've had a taste of the tour bus thing a little bit, and I'm like, the dream for me was a Sprinter van. And then in April, I got to do I played guitar for somebody, a guy that was in a band called Trick Pony back in the day. They had like a Grammy nomination, had a couple number ones, and I got to go on a tour bus. And I'm like, well, the dream just got bigger because this is so much cooler than a Sprinter van. Yeah.
You know what? I wish you 150 days on a tour bus over and over and over again for decades. I'm so happy for you that you were able to persevere, and I credit you with all the hard work that it took to get to Nashville to begin with, all of the paperwork and red tape that you had to go through, and then getting your family down there. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
And I really do wish you nothing but success in Nashville, and hit me up and let me know when you're coming back to town so we can go and have a beer or something like that. DylanFarrellMusic.com is the website. You're on the Facebook, you're on the social media and all of that stuff, and I appreciate you being here today.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. This was great.
Reluctantly.
Today's podcast brought to you by the Clayton Bellamy Foundation for the Arts, supporting education and community-based programs in the province of Alberta by providing financial support to arts programs in need. ClaytonBellamyFoundation.org.
Reluctantly.